So let's show you the bust for Heath Cummings. You were up first, Heath, and some big-time names on this list. And clearly, as we're going to say, this is based on value, where these guys are being drafted. So it's not necessarily that they're going to completely fail, but we're just telling you that you probably drafted them too high. So here's the list of busts for Heath. Starts with Joe Burrow, ends with Dawson Knox. Heath apparently is never going to Buffalo because they do not like him in Buffalo. You said on the Draftathon that Josh Allen was a bust based on cost, and I know that matters a lot here. So let's start with Burrow. But for Burrow, it's a little different conversation. Josh Allen going in the first round, I know why you don't like him. For Burrow, on our side, he's the 8th quarterback, and I know the ADP matters here. But is there any concern from a production standpoint that he could maybe not be a top 10 or even a top 12 quarterback?
There's concern that he could not be a top 10 quarterback because what we saw last year was he finished right around QB8, QB9 with incredible efficiency. Led the league in yards per attempt with a number that is 100% going to regress. My math suggests he needs to throw the ball about 50 more times to match last year's projection. Now, we're all expecting an increase in volume. And so as long as he throws more, I think he'll be right in this range, QB8, QB9. The reason I would call him a bust is because he's being drafted a round before Russell Wilson, a couple of rounds before, like 3 rounds before Trey Lance. Like, it's just too early. It's too close to Hurts and Kyler. There's a big gap after those guys for me before you get to Burrow.
And I'm going to say this a lot when we show our ADP. Our average draft position combines all of our drafts. So this could certainly be 2 quarterback, super flex leagues where the number gets pushed up. I always like to look at where the ranking is of the quarterback. But Dave, talk to me about Burrow because you had him as a breakout candidate earlier this offseason. And I know, again, we're looking at where the drafts are. So I think you might have said that before we saw what kind of the ADP was going to look like. But can this be a career season for Joe Burrow to the point where he should be considered as a top 5 quarterback? Because on other sites, that is his ADP. He's been drafted as a top 5 guy.
Well, the case for Burrow is simple. He's got an improved offensive line. He's got the best receiving core in the National Football League. Could have more explosive plays. He just needs more pass volume. And I think that's where Heath gets hung up on Burrow. And I do actually agree with Heath on that. If he doesn't throw more passes, then how in the world is he going to put up more numbers? And is he going to come close to that touchdown rate he had last year? That was 6.5%. And here's the other thing that bugs me about Burrow. Last year, he averaged 23.1 fantasy points per game. But he also had 2 games with 88 fantasy points. You know when they were. They helped you in the fantasy playoffs. Without those 2 games, it was 20.1 fantasy points per game. He's fun. He's cool. And if he's going to score more fantasy points, then either he's throwing a heck of a lot more than he did last year or something has gone wrong with Joe Mixon.
It's going to be interesting to see. Again, I think he's good to sort of settle for, if you will. I don't know if he's somebody necessarily want to target and certainly don't want to target at the cost that he is. If that is a 1 quarterback league ADP, probably a little bit too expensive. All right, next one you got here is Josh Jacobs. And we know that the coaching staff does not seem to be very fond of Josh Jacobs. The regime does not seem to be fond of Josh Jacobs, not picking up his 5th-year option. And we've kind of seen what they've been doing with the Gruden-Mayock guys. You go away, you go away. Seems like they want to make Josh Jacobs go away, but they're not going to do it this year.
Right.
And so Jacobs, his cost seems to be way out of control. 16th running back off the board on our side.
And usually when we're talking about guys that are being drafted too high, we see that their ADP trends towards where we're saying they should go. We all think Josh Jacobs round 5, round 6, that would be great. He's going at the 3-4 turn, and his ADP's actually gone up over the last week, 4 spots, getting closer to round 3. And I know why that is. It's because guys like Cam Akers, Antonio Gibson, all these guys getting bad news. It just seems like people, because he didn't have the little red cross next to his name, don't realize that Josh Jacobs is getting bad news as well. I think he's going to share early downs to some extent with Zamir White. It doesn't sound like they're going to give him much chance on passing downs because they love Amir Abdullah. I've been a Josh Jacobs guy the last 2 years. I usually feel like I'm getting huge value when I get him in round 4. This year, I can't take him in round 4. I wouldn't go till round 5 or 6.
Dave, you've kind of been a Josh Jacobs defender, and for me, like I'm taking Zamir White. He's the one of this backfield that I want to get stock in because of, again, this regime drafted him. But you've been saying that Josh Jacobs is still going to have a very good season. I think he's still ranked inside your top 20. Why is that, and why are you still so confident in him?
Because I think he's still going to be the lead running back for Las Vegas, and this is going to be an offense that will be better than it was last year. It will be better scheme. They've got Devontae Adams. It's going to be harder for defenses to try and slow down Josh Jacobs, and they're going to score a lot of points. And on the teams that score a lot of points, I want to have the running back that's going to be there. I don't mind drafting Jacobs and Zamir White, and Jacobs is a pick I'm not making in round 4, but I would take starting in round 5 if I needed a number 2 running back. And there was, when Jacobs is on the board, A.J. Dillon should not be on the board. J.K. Dobbins might be on the board. Chase Edmonds might be on the board. I'm okay going with Jacobs. I think he's still going to have that role for as long as he plays effectively. And last year, without Kenyon Drake on the field, He had 16 carries, 4 catches per game, almost 15 PPR points per game. I know Amir Abdullah is there, and he's going to take some work away from Josh Jacobs in that passing role. But I think Jacobs has enough work in that run role and in the goal line to be effective for fantasy managers as a number 2 running back.
It's the passing game that scares me, because it wasn't just Kenyon Drake not being there. It was Darren Waller not being there. Now Devontae Adams is there. Waller is back. Amir Abdullah is here. And if the touchdowns start to disappear, it could just be very, very bad for Josh Jacobs, especially based on his cost. The next guy you have is a bust. I do not understand his ADP at all. Damien Harris is going as the 24th running back off the board. Tell me if you would take him over any of these guys. Dameon Pierce.
No.
Elijah Mitchell.
Nope.
A.J. Dillon.
Nope.
Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Nope.
Next guy I think is where we start to get a little your range, Devin Singletary.
I would take him over Devin Singletary.
Okay, so there we are.
Yeah.
So
Nope.
These are guys that I just don't understand why Harris is going ahead of them, because we don't even know if Harris is still going to be the best running back on his own team. Ramondre Stevenson, if he has this role in the passing game, could be even better. I don't understand why Damien Harris is still being drafted as a starter.
Well, it's because he scored 15 touchdowns last year, and people are just seeing that big number, and they're saying, well, he's going to do that again, I think. And I don't expect that he is going to. First off, I don't know that this team's going to run for 15 touchdowns. The way the offense has looked in the training camp in the preseason, I do think Stevenson is a bigger problem for him. And you look, when you listed all those names, he's going 40 picks before Ramondre Stevenson. We've got them basically back-to-back. I actually prefer Stevenson in full PPR. I don't know that there's really going to be a lot of difference between Harris and Josh Jacobs, but Jacobs will probably catch twice as many passes. So I think it's a similar role in the running game, but Jacobs does more in the passing game, and they're both busts.
At the end of the season last year, it was basically a split backfield because Ramondre Stevenson was sharing touches with Damien Harris. So I don't get it. Don't chase the touchdowns. This team could be very, very bad. They have a very limited receiving core. The offensive line is not as good, and this run game might not be as successful, especially from a touchdown standpoint. So might be a situation that you want to avoid. All right, Heath, why do you hate the Bills? You got 2 guys here on your bust list. You got Gabriel Davis. You hate both of his names. Dawson, Knox, both guys that are going to be heavily involved with arguably the best quarterback in the NFL, and you're just not buying it.
Well, and it's the to the degree that they are heavily involved that I think we've yet to find out. We've not ever seen Gabriel Davis earn 70 targets in a season yet, and now he's being projected by many for 120. Dawson Knox was basically just the tight end version of Damien Harris last year. He scored a bunch of touchdowns, but he didn't really do much else. I will say, I drafted Gabe Davis like 15 minutes before this show started.
No way.
In the 4th round.
Okay.
But it was a best ball league,
Okay.
and I already had Josh Allen.
Makes sense.
And that's what's happened all summer long is he's been boosted up because in best ball you should stack, and Josh Allen's the first quarterback that gets taken. He's a great guy to pair with him. In a redraft league where stacking doesn't matter as much, especially if you don't have Josh Adams, I think he's a low end, number 3 wide receiver in full PPR. I would rank him closer to where you guys have him in non-PPR. You look at our Sportsline projection, and they dislike him more than I do, and they have him for 10 touchdowns. It's because they've got him at 80 targets. It's just, if he has that type of season, he's more like a Dawson Knox tight end than he is a number 2 wide receiver.
Dave, you are certainly in the Gabe Davis camp. You're also in the Isaiah McKenzie camp, and I'm going to guess you're still drafting Stephon Diggs at least as a round 2 pick. So how does this all work where all these guys are going to have career seasons essentially?
You see, Jamie, it starts with Josh Allen, and that's what Buffalo's going to do. They're going to start with Josh Allen, and then they're going to continue with Josh Allen, and then they're going to wrap it up with Josh Allen. This is a team that loves to pass because of who I've been talking about, and they've done it to the tune of at least 598 attempts each of the last 2 years. Last year, the Bills threw for over 650 attempts. Josh Allen, I think, had 644 of them. So there are a lot of targets available across the board. I do think Diggs takes a hit. I don't think he gets 160 targets anymore, but he could be 140. And I think Gabriel Davis is in line for 120. They've been talking him up, and he's been impressing. He's really improved his game this offseason. All the reports have been glowing about him. And Isaiah McKenzie, the exact same thing. And that's the one area that the Bills really wanted to focus on this offseason. You think about how they've kind of they looked for a running back in J.D. McKissick. They tried to bring him in. They didn't bring him in. They're looking for yards after catch. They got that with James Cook to a degree. I don't know how big of a contributor Cook's going to be in the start of the year, but McKenzie gives them that out of the slot. And Josh Allen has leaned on his slot receiver each of the last 2 seasons to a considerable degree compared to the rest of the National Football League. I think there's 400 targets for the taking just for the top 3 receivers alone in Buffalo.
I'm so curious what they're going to do with Jamison Crowder.
Yeah. Well, they may be starting Jamison Crowder because they're not sure Isaiah McKenzie's going to be ready for week 1. So that would be a little bit of a problem as well. But I think that's the key is you look at their target share from last year and people say Sanders is now going to be Davis or Beasley is now going to be McKenzie. And that's possible, but I still think Khalil Shakir is probably going to be Davis from last year. And Jamison Crowder is probably going to be McKenzie from last year. And so I don't think you could just take those extra targets and give them all to these top 3 guys. It would be great if we could. I wish every NFL team would do that. Our jobs would be much easier if there was no number 4 or number 5 wide receiver.